Good morning. Fantastic. Today is a transitional lecture. We're moving away from epistemology, the study of knowledge, and we're going to be talking about metaphysics, what is real, starting next lecture. But this is a transitional lecture because the topic is really, can we have knowledge that transcends the senses? So if we remember back to philosophical naturalism, and of course, our last lecture was on science, and science uses empiricism and the inductive method to try to figure out about the world. It relies heavily on the senses, almost exclusively on the senses. That's how we get information about the world. And of course, we do have the problem of certainty or skepticism, that we can never be 100% sure that what we're experiencing is absolutely real. There is no absolute foundation for knowledge. But using the concept of probability, we can say that the things that we see and experience, because we can control and predict that natural phenomena, our theories are probably true. And that's good enough. Well, good enough for some people, maybe. But is there a way we can transcend our empirical limitations? And perhaps there's another way that we could approach this problem of knowledge. And so today we're really talking about, if we come right down to it, faith versus reason. A very old discussion, right? Is faith ever appropriate? Now, again, I'm not talking about how you conduct your day-to-day life, because that's a decision that you have to make. I'm talking about in philosophy. When we do philosophy, is it ever appropriate to promulgate a belief on insufficient information? And that's the question. That is it philosophically defensible to believe by faith? And that's an interesting question, isn't it? Not should faith play a role in your life, or the role that faith does play in your life, or any of those questions. Those are interesting questions, but they go beyond the scope of this class. So let's be very clear about what we're talking about. Within the confines of philosophical discourse, is it ever appropriate to believe by faith? And we're going to get two very approaches to this. We're going to look at Clifford and we're going to look at James, and both have very good ideas, but have come to very different conclusions about knowledge. Now, we are still talking about knowledge. Yes, Naja.
Just a quick question. If there's no real absolute foundation for knowledge, then do we actually ever really have facts?
Yeah, good.
Because facts
That's
are
what that's what we've been talking about. Yes, that's what we've been talking about, right? That you put your finger on the crux of the issue. The true skeptic would say no. And the nihilist would say, no, it's impossible to know anything. I think that's ridiculous, personally. I think we can know a great many things, and we can have very high confidence in our beliefs if they're based on reason and logic and observation. And if we test our beliefs and we look for the black swan, did you see the lecture yesterday?
No, I didn't get to watch the one from
Okay.
yesterday yet.
Sorry for the reference then, but if we follow the scientific method, we get to certainly defensible, reasonable beliefs that can be tested. But again, because science is an inductive method based on inductive reasoning and based on the senses, we don't get a foundation of absolute certainty. We just can't. Now, does that matter? Some people would say, well, looking for certainty outside of mathematics is a ridiculous quest in the first place. We shouldn't be concerned with certainty. But other people are like, no, like Descartes, remember? Descartes was like, hey, I want something firm to stand on. I want real facts. I want to be absolutely sure. And so, yes, that is exactly the question that we're addressing. So, Chloe, man, coming into the discussion. Fantastic. So again, going back to our philosophical definition of knowledge, and again, this is an introductory course. If you were to take a class on epistemology, you would find that not everybody agrees to this definition, but again, I'm doing my best to introduce you to concepts, and as you develop your understanding of these issues, your ability to conceptualize these issues and talk about these issues will deepen. But a generally accepted definition of knowledge is that knowledge is justified true belief. So in order to know a given proposition is true, one must not only believe the relevant true proposition, but one must have evidence and justification for that proposition. In formal terms, a subject knows a proposition P is true if and only if P is true. She believes that P is true and is justified, has proper evidence that P is true. So, okay, that's great, but there are some problems. There are some problems even with this definition of knowledge, and it gets back to what Nadja just said. So, justified true belief actually turns out it cannot be a sufficient definition for knowledge, because you could have a belief that was justified, but it turns out that the justification was based on false empirical data. Right? Also, we talked about this. There's the problem of epistemic regress. And so all knowledge claims require their own support. So this is great. So we need evidence for whatever we say. But the evidence that we use to justify what we say, our opinion, also needs evidence. That evidence also needs its own evidence. That evidence also needs its own evidence. And so there's an infinite regress of justification. So all knowledge claims require some type of evidence or justification. However, justification requires its own justification, its own support. And this means that any proposition can be endlessly questioned, resulting in an infinite regress of justifications. So let me give you an example of this. Is the Earth a sphere? Pretty simple question. Answer, yeah, yes. What's the justification? Oh, we have satellite images of the Earth, and it shows very clearly that the Earth is a sphere. Fantastic. So are we done? Have we settled this question? No. Wait a minute. How do we know those images are correct? Answer. Well, we calibrated and tested the cameras before we launched the satellite. So are we done?
No.
No, we're not done. How do you know those tests are reliable? Oh, because we used the same test on a camera that took a photo of this building, and the camera worked perfectly. Are we done? No. How do you know this building is actually here? Never stops. Again, this is like the 5-year-old. Why? Well, because I told you so. So eventually you just have to bite the bullet and assume something is true without evidence. It's just the way it is. Now, going back to this example, I mean, when we get to the person that says, well, how do you know the building is really here? I think that come on. I don't think that's a reasonable doubt. But you could still put it forward, right? So one way out of this problem is to claim that some claims are foundational. That is, some claims don't stand in need of justification. And this is what Descartes was trying to do, right? I exist. Do I need evidence for that? No. Why not? It's just true. It has to be true. Right? Do you guys see again what Descartes was trying to do? He's trying to create a foundation that doesn't itself need any justification. Yeah.
So if the one truth or the one thing that we know is absolutely true is that I exist, then suppose I went into space and I drew it myself, what Earth looked like. Then would they be like, well,
yeah, how do you know your senses are reliable?
how do you know your eyes were real?
Yeah, well, no, not real, but reliable. How do you know that you're reporting how it really is and all that? Yeah, and almost any justification. Like, that's the problem with Descartes. Yeah, you can, okay, let's admit that, okay, I can't doubt that I exist, but there's nothing else is knowable. Okay, how does Descartes get out of this? We know how he gets out of this.
Well, faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not faith, because he has an argument.
Believing that God.
Yes. Yeah, he demonstrates logically that God also exists. So we can know that God exists. And if God exists, he would not deceive us. So we can be sure about what we see through the senses. That, like I said, is maybe that's true, but that is not a great philosophical argument. You might as well just say, oh, faith. Now, here's another way out of this, Nadja, and you might like this. And this is called Reformed epistemology, and this comes from a theologian named Alvin Plantinga. And Plantinga says, well, belief in God can be justified by direct experience of God, by direct experience of the divine, apart from evidence accessible to others. So if you ask me why I think that God exists, I can say, I know that God exists in exactly the same way I know that I exist. I don't need to provide evidence for that because I experience the divine directly. God is self-evident. Just like belief that I am here or you are here is self-evident, it doesn't stand in need of justification. My experience of the divine is direct. Now, in some Protestant traditions, particularly evangelical traditions, this is not problematic because we do have a personal relationship with God, not in every manifestation of Christianity, for sure, but in some, you do have a personal relationship with God. You experience God directly. And so you just know that God exists in the way that you know that you exist. Now, this works great if you believe, not so great if you don't, right? You're not going to convince anybody because of your personal testimony. Yeah, I really super believe that God exists. So you should too. That's not how it works. But if you already believe that you experience the divine directly, yes, you have a really good foundation for epistemological claims, because if you begin with the assumption that God is real, then you have a firm foundation for all other knowledge, right? So you can have certainty because God will not deceive you. And so the world is as it appears to you.
And that gets sort of tricky too when sometimes there's crimes and people say, well, God told me to do it. Like it's still questionable your personal relationship with God and how you actually receive what he says.
That's why people were killed over the Reformation. Okay, because the church authorities were like, you can't just be printing Bibles in common ordinary language and letting lay people decide what the truth is. You'll have 10,000 different variations of the truth. And that is not going to work. There's no way to control that. And of course, that's exactly what happened. I mean, historically, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm not arguing for, religious authoritarianism. I'm just saying that yes, that is exactly what happened. All right. So can we have knowledge beyond the senses? And this brings us to our main argument or our main discussion, faith versus reason. Now, faith is an interesting concept. It's a complicated concept. So I'm going to simplify it in a way that may be a bit controversial. And that's fine. But in having had very long discussions about this, I am still yet to be convinced that faith is anything other than confidence or trust in a belief without empirical evidence. And I think even most religious people would say, well, yes, there's merit to faith because there is no persuasive evidence. If there was persuasive evidence, then faith would not be necessary. That's the way that I understand it. And that's the way that I've always looked at it. I know that some people disagree. I'm aware of that. But I'm going to look at faith, and here the way that James and Clifford, they're talking about faith is that I have high confidence or trust in a belief without sufficient empirical evidence to justify that belief. Right. And so this is akin, if you're familiar with Tertullian, and this is often misunderstood when Tertullian says, well, I believe, when he's talking about the doctrine of the Trinity, right? I believe because it is absurd. Now, that is a nuanced claim from Tertullian, if you guys have studied this. And it doesn't mean exactly, I think, what people think that it means, but at least in regard to the doctrine of the Trinity makes no sense logically. But that itself is a marker of faith that I believe absurdities. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but all things are possible with God, and I believe that God can make that so. There's no evidence for that. There's no compelling argument for that. But what marks, if I'm a believer, what marks me as a believer in that particular tradition is that there are certain beliefs that can only be asserted through faith because they don't make any sense, right? There may be other beliefs that can be known on the basis of sense experience and logic and all of that, but there are just certain core tenets that must be taken on faith, right? So again, here's our philosophical definition of knowledge, and our philosophical definition of knowledge says, no, you can't do this. You must have justification for any belief that you hold. You must have proper evidence. You must have proper support. It has to be plausible, at least probable, right? So here comes Clifford, and Clifford is going to give us the philosophical rebuttal for faith. He's going to say, look, it is wrong always and everywhere for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. It just is wrong. And he doesn't mean wrong in the sense of error. He means that if you promulgate evidence with or a position or an opinion with insufficient evidence, you are morally culpable, because great harm can be done. And that's Clifford's position. And so here's his argument, and his argument is directed towards belief in God. And so Clifford offers an argument against theism. Theism is a term that we will be using. It means just a general affirmation of God's existence or belief in God. It's usually contrasted with atheism, which is an active disbelief in God, or agnosticism, which is I just don't know. So here, Clifford says, premise one, there is insufficient evidence for belief that God exists. That's probably true, at least in a philosophical or scientific sense. Two, it is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. So it is wrong to believe that God exists. It's not, you don't have justification for that belief. So you should not believe that God exists. Yeah.
So I would question this individual, Clifford, that has he tasted and seen? So how is he just saying that without having tested? Like where is his evidence to say that there's
So, I mean,
insufficient,
then you're getting into a kind of
right?
fallacy of asking him to prove a negative, right? So he's saying that, look, in order to hold a belief, you have to have sufficient evidence for that belief. If you are going to promulgate the idea that God exists, well, where's your evidence?
But
And
if and then we can say then that it's our personal experiences and
yeah, but that, I mean, I'm not interested in anyone else's personal experience. I mean, if you say, like, I have a personal experience that I can fly and you should too, I'm like, no, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? I don't care about that, right?
but I mean, like, well,
Yeah,
I guess it would be a little bit more than that, like saying,
yeah,
supposing you were on your deathbed or something,
yeah,
and they had tried every medicine, all the things, and then you
yeah.
prayed and say you recovered just miraculously and everything and you were better. But I don't know that if you haven't tested, you can accurately say that there's insufficient evidence because like we said with faith, but it being different,
Well,
evidence is in
okay, yeah,
believing, right? And then
let's
seeing.
let's talk about Bigfoot instead of God. Is there
Mhm.
sufficient evidence that Bigfoot exists?
So
Should that be like a class that you could take a class like in biology on Bigfoot? No. I mean, that's nobody, no. I mean, maybe Bigfoot does exist, who knows, but there's
mhm,
not sufficient evidence. And so, as a professor, it would be irresponsible for me to promulgate the belief that Bigfoot exists. I could say,
mhm,
I'm interested in the possibility that Bigfoot exists.
mhm,
There are people who attest that they've seen Bigfoot, but their testimony, well, who knows? There simply is not a body of evidence to support this. So I'm going to treat it as if it's irrelevant.
mhm.
This is what Clifford is saying. He says we have responsibility to pass on information that is good information. Now we're going to see the counter argument here, Naja. Don't worry, we're we're gonna we're gonna get to the counter argument soon enough. But what Clifford is saying is that when you have beliefs, no matter how strongly a person holds that belief, if there's not sufficient evidence, they shouldn't hold that belief, and they shouldn't spread that belief because that could be dangerous. Right? Okay. And that's all. That's what he's saying. But we will get to the rebuttal. Don't worry. James is gonna say, hey, wait a minute, maybe you're missing something here. Maybe you're leaving something out. Right. So Clifford also says that this is there's a violation of our responsibility to others in a way. So this is also a moral problem, that it's morally wrong because we place others in jeopardy when we promulgate bad information. So he illustrates this point with a story. And he gives two examples. We're going to look at one, and Clifford claims that we should morally condemn the person that acts on insufficient information. We should be angry at that person because that person is a threat to us. Does anybody remember the History Channel when the History Channel actually did history and not
Yes.
aliens and ghosts?
Yes, we used to watch this guy.
This guy, man, oh man, it's fun stuff though, right?
Mhm.
Pyramids, yeah, all this stuff, right? Okay, so Clifford gives us the story of the ship owner. It's a compelling story, right? It's a compelling story. So there's a ship owner, and people have booked passage on the ship. And the ship is not in great condition. It is rusty. There are barnacles on the ship. There are places where it seems to be leaking very badly. And so any normal person, what happens with the ship owner, any normal person would begin to have doubts in the seaworthiness of the ship. And so the ship owner has doubts. He begins to worry. He starts to think, my God, what could happen if, is this ship going to make it? But these people have paid a lot of money to be on the ship, right? So he doesn't conduct an investigation. What does he do? He convinces himself that everything is going to be okay. And this is essential to understanding this story. That when the ship takes off with all of those passengers on board, at that moment, the ship owner genuinely believes with all of his heart that everything will be okay. Now, do you think everything is going to be okay? No. The ship's, like, here's the thing. The ship sinks, right? This guy has doubts. This makes him uncomfortable. But instead of performing an investigation and finding evidence, he convinces himself that everything is going to be okay. Does he have justification for that belief? No. There is insufficient evidence that that ship is seaworthy. In fact, there's evidence that it's not seaworthy. So by deceiving himself, and this is what he is doing, he is deceiving himself. He comes to sincerely believe that the ship is sound, but it is not sound. The ship goes down. Everybody drowns. Everybody drowns. All of those people die. So despite the sincerity of the ship owner's belief, that belief was not the product of genuine investigation. There was no justification for that belief. He had no right to believe that the ship was safe. And people died because of this guy. So Clifford says this: we have a duty to question what we believe. All of us do. The duty to question and justify extends to every person, no matter what their place is in society. You don't have to be a ship owner. There are people out there who depend on your judgment. Any person is capable of promulgating poorly supported positions and theories. Failure to question your beliefs can lead to disaster. So you have a responsibility anytime you put forward information to other people to make sure that information is sound, that you're justified in those conclusions. And if you're not, if you have doubts, you should tell people you have doubts. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if you should rely on this. Your health could be at stake. Your safety could be at stake. So when you pass on information, that should be really good information. I guess what Clifford is saying is that think before you hit send. Think before you post that thing. Is that true? Is it true? Is it real? Now, here's the problem. This is difficult to do. It's easier just to hit send. It's easier just to say, oh, that seems true to me. I'm going to tell other people about it. Doubting takes effort. Skepticism takes effort, and it will undermine beliefs that make us comfortable. but it's a duty. We owe other people that duty to be careful about what we tell them. Only when our belief has been fairly earned by investigation should we pass that belief on. Right. And like Einstein said that Einstein told us in 2013 that if it's on the internet, it has to be true. Right. You know how I know this is true? It was on the internet. That's how I know. I love these things. Now, you guys probably don't remember this, but there was a time, and students have sent me most of these. Said, Professor, check this out. There was a time when Apple changed its headphone jack. It just took out its headphone jack, and people were upset about that. And so somebody got on the internet with a YouTube video and said, oh, don't worry about it. You can make your own. All you have to do is drill right into your phone. And so many people did this. Now, the person that did this, I am sure, didn't believe it. They probably did it as a joke. But you can see when you post something like this, people will respond and people will act. And people are credulous, right? A student sent me this. It was a report from Princeton University that said decorative magnets that you put on your refrigerator can cause cancer because they radiate your food. Of course, it takes all of about 10 seconds to do a Google search to find out that there was no such study. But people buy this stuff anyway. They just pass it, like they get this in their inbox and they just pass it on, right? Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how to word it real quick. So if like it's we're like supposed to condemn doubters, shouldn't it low-key be the other way around where you should, if we have like skepticism, shouldn't we be doubting everything, especially with like social media now and so much fake news? I mean, it's
Oh,
that's what's kind of taught in school now that like you
yes.
need to double check everything.
Everything, even, even images now, right? Because I don't know if you're seeing what like NVIDIA AI can do with just a few prompts. They can create images that are, I mean, you have to be essentially an expert to tell the difference. We are in an age of misinformation, a golden age of misinformation, and it's just starting, right? And I even see things. I just write, to be honest with you, it's Deja, right?
Yes, it's Deja.
To be honest with you, everything that I see that's on social media, I assume that it's not real until I check it out. And that's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's a byline and it's from a reputable source that I'm unfamiliar with, if it's just posted there, even if it's a video or a photograph, I just assume it's not real until I check it out.
So are we also kind of helping like I don't want to say, well, I guess like the fake news spread if we're not double checking, like we
Yes,
see it and we're
yes.
like, oh, it's fake, and then just keep moving on by not being like, this is fake, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but that's exhausting, isn't it? I mean, it's just we're just inundated with so much bad information, and this is exactly what Clifford says. It's hard. It's hard to do this. It's easier just to say, yeah, well, maybe, right? Yeah, this is very tough. Raquel?
So I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I have tons of children. I have 5 kids, and my oldest right now, he's 14. And he's kind of like into the whole social media stuff, and he shows me all these TikToks, and I have to explain like not everything is real that you see.
Yeah.
And what I get a lot back from is, how do you know? I'm like, I grew up before the internet was out there. Fact check. If you don't believe me, look it up yourself. And I feel like it's more of, I don't want to necessarily say it's this generation, but when I tell my children it's not real, look it up, they question my truth.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you have to like you said, you have to look into it. But it's kind of like, no, it's on here. It's true. I'm like, ugh, I can't.
Yeah.
It's a debate that never ends. So that's where my concern is.
Because your kids, and let's be real about this, are being
Yeah.
targeted and manipulated by
all the time.
so
Yeah.
many people.
Yeah.
And, the content is shaped, in a lab. Essentially, you have people who are thinking about this 24/7 and getting paid a lot of money to shape
Mhm.
the content in a way that almost makes it impossible for them to look away.
Right. And then, the sad part is it gets into disagreements with my children or even my little ones. And they're watching their YouTube channels and like Ryan's World. I need to get this toy. I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, why are you watching people play with toys when you can play with toys yourself and enjoy the fun for yourself instead of everyone else's opinion? But it's a real hard debate here when I'm against 5 kids.
Yeah. Well, and advertising we've always had this struggle with advertising. And I can remember when I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked when my parents sat me down and told me that the people who were selling toys were actually being paid for that. And I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. But I mean, now it's like, it's like 24/7. Everything is about manipulation. Everything is about capturing attention. Everything is about getting likes, about getting subscriptions, about getting views. And so now that we have the technology to generate content that looks identical to reality,
yeah.
I don't have any answers for that. I think that the technology.
No, yeah. It's me either. It's kind of like I question if my children are safe online or what they're watching, and I'm constantly hovering over them.
Is no.
Yeah.
It's really no.
It's hard.
And
yeah.
I don't know. Hi, Gift. Good to see you. I don't know if you guys are following this, but I follow this because I have two sons, two teenage sons, and I am very concerned about a lot of the content about masculinity online. Because my sons work out and they're in a gym culture and they get bombarded with a lot of stuff that is really horrific about how to relate to women and my boys seem to be okay and they seem to be able to filter through that, but it's a crisis right now, right? Yeah. Not to be a downer, but yes, I think we're entering into a kind of a hyper reality in a way, right? Where stuff is more real than real. And, how do you know? And I don't know what to do about that. I don't. I wish I did. Thank you for that comment.
I think that's when we pray, because it is hard. And my 2 boys are older, 20 and 24.
Yeah.
So sort of just kind of miss this where they're adult, but still, just like you said, Raquel, they get caught up in just scrolling and sometimes it's really hard to get our kids back into reality.
I do myself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I'm, get off my lawn. You can't. I like this stuff too, and I'll be looking at stuff and go like, man, 45 minutes just went by, and I'm looking at like these videos, and I'm getting caught up in this stuff. How can the kids not?
I think it's more of it's like an even harder job for a parent. You got to be more interactive and getting out of the house and going to the park and like doing things in the real world so they are more exposed to reality, even though they have their phones open when you're at the park too sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of supplement that with actual activities where they're engaging all together.
Yeah, and the
It is
trust
hard.
issue is, at a certain age, it's normal for them to question you and to try to break away from you and at a certain independence. But I worry about like where they're going, right? Here's another thing, I don't know if you guys remember this. Nadja, you may, the scary clown panic. Okay, this was when the internet was relatively younger, a few years ago. But this was, there were scary clowns that were being sighted all over the country. Now, this was really interesting to me because I watched it unfold in real time. And I knew right away because I had read the initial police reports, that this entire thing was bogus. The entire thing was completely bogus. It was based on a false police report. There was absolutely no evidence. There were some kids who cited a clown in the forest, but when it hit the internet, it really took off, and people were seeing clowns everywhere. And of course, eventually, people were dressing up like clowns and trolling and things like that. But this was just entirely, the whole thing was bogus. It took off. There were people who were obsessed with this. There was all kinds of stuff going on. Eman, do you remember this?
Yes, definitely. Actually, being a clown myself, actually, because like me and my dad, we both work as clowns, and
Well, that must have been a
this
terrible time for you.
this was definitely a terrible time for, especially for little kids who thought like, oh, they were scared of clowns, and it's like, um, working at parties and everything. Especially we still do it now. It's just that we're not getting it much now, but it's like
Yeah.
when it was back in the day, we still got a lot of parties. Kids were just screaming, they were being so scared until like an hour later.
Yeah.
Until we researched, look, man, creepy clowns, that we are not them type of clowns. You gotta understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, out of the dozens and dozens of police reports, none of this is real. Like I said, there were copycats who were just trolling, but none of the original reports had. Oh, Raquel says there was a clown incident in my children's school during that time. It took a lot of reaffirming my children that they were okay and safe. Many copycats, yes. Deja?
Oof. Yeah, so I remember this when I was like in school. I remember I was like in middle school or something. But I didn't even know there was original like reports that even happened. I just remember being like I lived in a small kind of town, so like and our middle school was surrounded by woods. So for me, that was the most terrifying time of my life. And I did not want to go to school. And then someone reported, like, hey, there's a clown in the woods. And I was like, they're going to make us run in the woods because that's what we had to do. And I was like, and someone's going to get hurt. And then I remember they had to cancel it because the whole school was panicked because, there's a clown in the woods. And as far as we're aware, that's a stranger.
Yeah.
Middle school children and the older
Yeah.
kids were like, yeah, there's definitely a clown. We don't want to do that. Let's tell everybody.
Yeah.
It was the most terrifying thing like that entire year.
Yeah, I remember that very, very well. Gift, we are on Clifford and James. We're talking about faith versus reason. Slender Man. Now, this was interesting because Slender Man, and I'm sure most of you have heard about this. Slender Man is not actually a cryptid. He's kind of like a cryptid, but Slender Man, the origin of Slender Man stories was actually on an online forum for short fictional horror stories, and somebody wrote the story Slender Man. But this took on a life of its own, and this unfortunately culminated in a murder. And I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but a young woman was killed by her friend, and she said that Slender Man had told her to do it. But this is how these kind of things take off in real time. And of course, obviously, Tupac is cited all the time in various places, and these rumors come back periodically. How many of you? Oh yeah, the Slender Man thing, Raquel. How many of you have heard about this? Birds aren't real. It is a thing. You can Google it. Now, the fun thing about birds aren't real is this started as a TikTok account that was just a joke, a parody of misinformation. But of course, what happened? People began to treat it as if it were real. And the idea is that birds are not real. They're simply government has created them to do surveillance on you, which is a kind of fun idea, right? But people began to take it seriously. So why do people believe in these conspiracy theories? Why do people believe so easily this misinformation that is online? Well, there are reasons, right? Rooted in human psychology. People want certainty. Okay, getting back to what we were saying about certainty. They don't like uncertainty. They want clear and simple explanations for events, especially in times of crisis. And so we gravitate towards simple explanations. Now, here's the problem. Reality is hard. Reality is complex. Reality requires nuanced understanding. But when people are scared, they want simple explanations, even if those explanations aren't true. Pattern recognition. Humans are naturally inclined to recognize patterns even where there are no patterns. A sense of control and security. Believing in conspiracy theories can give individuals a sense of control by attributing events to deliberate plan rather than randomness or chaos. People don't like to think that things just happen randomly or the world is ultimately chaotic. They would rather believe that everything that's going on is a result of planning and purpose, right? Sometimes self-esteem plays a role in the promulgation of conspiracy theories. For some, holding beliefs that are non-mainstream can boost your self-esteem and provide a sense of being special. I know the truth, you sheeple don't. Like, I'm the one who knows. I figured it all out, and you guys are just sheeple and doing what you're told, but I really have this knowledge, and that makes me special. And then there's a sense of community. I don't know if you guys have seen this or ever been a part of it, but in these communities where these beliefs are promulgated, there's a sense of community and belonging. And that's a powerful motivator. Sharing and discussing conspiracy theories can strengthen bonds within a community or group and provide social support and a sense of belonging. And that is a very, very powerful motivation. Okay, so misinformation and disinformation. This is a real reason, okay? So this is a problem that we've been talking about, the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation, especially on social media. This can contribute very quickly to the spread of conspiracy theories. You can see this in real time. You can see this almost every few days. There's a new conspiracy theory, it seems, and it spreads like wildfire because that's the way that social media is designed to work. And bad information gets out there, it gets spread. Look, the truth gets or a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can get started, right? That's just the way that human nature works. And we gravitate towards bad information. We have a negativity bias, right? And so when we see something, we're like, oh, yeah, that sounds true. I'm going to pass it on. Clifford says, no, we can't do that. Now, this brings us to James. And William James is a huge figure in American philosophy and psychology. In fact, often James is referred to as the father of American psychology. James was a powerful intellect, but I will say this, he is a confusing writer. And so if you're reading the James article and you're confused, well, you're not alone. But here's a quote that reveals a lot about what James is going to say. He says, believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact. James really thinks that our beliefs can shape our reality in a fundamental way. Okay? Even if those beliefs are not supported by sufficient evidence, those beliefs might still be very important to us. Okay? So if you understand that, you get a sense of where James is coming from. Think about the power of positive thinking in a way. How sometimes if we manifest thoughts about the things that we want to happen, that can assist in He's not talking about magical thinking. He's just saying that, look, you have to believe in things in order to create that reality. And sometimes you don't have good evidence for that belief, but you have to believe anyway. Okay? So that's kind of where James is going. Now, here's where it gets a little bit confusing, and James creates the confusion with the way that he uses language. Let me see if I can clear it up for you. James wants to talk about our beliefs, but he couches it in terms of the choices that we make. Okay? So James wants to talk about the choices that we make. And James catalogs the types of choices that we make in a very specific way. So the point that he wants to make, and don't lose sight of this, is that there are important choices that we make where there is insufficient evidence, but we have to choose anyway. Okay, that's really what he's saying. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. His main point is this: there are choices that we have to make, important choices. But we have to make those choices without sufficient evidence. But we have to choose anyway. And so here's where James gets a little bit confusing. He says that the types of choices that a human being can make are living, forced, and momentous. These are the important choices. And so he's going to describe the different types of choices that we can make in terms of being living or dead, forced or avoidable, or momentous or trivial. Okay, but remember, what he's really talking about are super important choices that we have to make, but we don't have sufficient evidence for. Okay, that's really what's going on. But let's go through his categories, although I don't think they're all that helpful. Let's go through his categories and see what he's talking about. So any choice we make will fit in one of three categories. It will be living or dead, that is plausible to us or implausible. It will be forced on us or avoidable. And it will also be either momentous or trivial. Okay? So these are the types of choices we can make. Plausible or implausible, forced or avoidable, momentous or trivial. So, living or dead, plausible or implausible. So in order for us to make a choice, to us, that choice must be plausible. It must be a possibility, a live possibility. There are sometimes people will give us a choice, but we're like, that choice doesn't make any sense to me. But like a real choice is something to us that is plausible, something that we could actually do. So in order to make a choice, it has to be the kind of choice that we can imagine ourselves actually choosing. The second category here that he talks about is the forced choice. Some choices are forced on us, some choices are avoidable, right? Let me give you an example. If I ask you if you want the carrot cake or the pumpkin pie for dessert, I say, hey, it's time for dessert. Would you like the carrot cake or would you like the pumpkin pie? That's an avoidable choice. You don't have to decide between those two options. Why not? What else could you decide?
Not to eat the cake at all.
Yeah, you could opt out. You could say, I don't want dessert at all. I'm not going to eat. Or you could say, well, I'm on a diet, so, I'm going to have something more healthy. So that's an avoidable choice. But what if I say this to you? Eat this pie or don't eat this pie. Is there a way out of that choice? No. That's a forced choice. So some choices we have to make, right? There's no way out of it. We have to choose. Some choices are avoidable, but some choices are forced on us because we have to choose. Eat the pie, don't eat the pie. I have to choose one of those. Now, the third category is that some choices are just trivial choices. They don't matter to us. What shoes I'm going to wear today is a trivial choice. It really doesn't matter. What I'm going to eat for dinner really doesn't matter. But some choices are momentous. They will change our life. Should I move across the country? Should I sell all my possessions and become a monk? Should I join the army? Should I enroll in college? Should I get married? These choices are all momentous. They will change the course of our life. Now, let's think about religion. What about the choice of religion? Should I believe in God? For most of us, it's a plausible choice. I mean, even if we don't believe in God, most of us would say, well, the idea is at least possible. I could be religious. Is it a forced choice or an avoidable choice? Yeah.
I guess it kind of depends on who. I grew up going to Catholic school, so that's all I knew.
Yeah.
So with my children, I didn't force it upon them.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying do you have to believe in a certain religion.
But
Raquel,
no, that's what I grew up with. So
like
yeah, sorry.
if I ask you, should you believe in God or not believe in God?
Oh,
It's up to you. But
right.
is that an avoidable choice or is it a forced choice?
Unavoidable. For myself, I would say avoidable.
Is it?
For myself.
What's the alternative to believing in religion or not believing?
A lot of the times I hear, well, what I've come across is if they don't believe in religion or faith, it's more going based off science and like actual proof.
Yeah, but that's a choice not to believe, right?
That's true. Yes.
So yeah. So I mean, you're going to pick one or the other, right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah. So it's a forced choice.
Okay.
For most people, it's plausible, and it's a forced choice. You can't avoid it. You have at some point in your life. Let's put it this way: you're going to decide. You're going to say, "Yeah, I like religion. I think that will pay off for me. I think that God is maybe out there somewhere, and I want to worship God in some way." Or you're going to say, "No, not for me."
I understand. I get it.
Yeah. No, good. I mean, that was exact. I like the way we could walk through that, right? What's our last category here? Is the choice to be religious a trivial choice or a momentous choice?
Momentous.
Yeah, very much so. If I choose to believe in God or I choose not to believe in God, that's going to change my life forever. It's going to change the way I think about things. It's going to change my relationship with people, right? It's a momentous choice. Okay, so this is what James says about religion. It's a live option for most people. It's at least plausible. It's a forced option. Some people are agnostic. They just wait. But if you want to get the good from religion that believers get, you have to get off the fence and you have to join the club, or you have to opt out of that. So it's pretty much a forced choice. Finally, religion is a momentous option since it could make a big difference in your life if it were true. Now, what's the problem? You have to make this choice. You have to choose to believe in God or not believe in God. You have to choose. You must choose. Eventually, you must get off the fence and choose. What's the problem with this choice? Not enough evidence to make this choice. There's insufficient evidence. You have personal testimony from people who say, yes, I'm religious, it works for me. Yes, I have a personal relationship with God. Yes, I saw a burning bush in the sky. That doesn't convince me. So there's insufficient evidence for this choice that I have to make. What would Clifford say? I can't believe because there's not enough evidence. I can't. Look, James says, wait a minute. This is not a choice that anyone makes on the basis of evidence. It just isn't. I've known lots of religious people. I've been in and out of religion and involved and studied religion my whole life. I don't think I know anyone who said, well, I did a calculation, and on the basis of that calculation, now I'm religious. It's not how religion works. Right? I mean, ask yourself, like, what is your connection to your faith tradition? It's not, well, you know, I did a quantified analysis of comparative religion, and it turns out that Jainism is for me. Or I think the Zoroastrians were right. I'm resurrecting that religion. Right? No, no one does that. So this is a decision that people make all the time, every day. But they don't use the criterion of evidence. How do they decide this question of faith? There's no conclusive evidence that any religion is real. How do you decide this question? Clifford says you can't. You have to reject it. But how do people really decide this? Let me give you an analogy that will work very well here. How many of you have ever been in love? Nadja, congratulations. What a fantastic experience that is. How did you know you were in love?
I think feeling energy, what that person does to you, how it like releases exciting things in your body, like it's the energy that and the feeling and the connectedness. That's a lot of stuff.
Okay, Clifford is horrified. None of that sounds like sufficient evidence in a philosophical sense. You did not have sufficient evidence for that belief. You should not have fallen in love. That's ridiculous. Okay, James says this. Waiting to decide if religion is true is like waiting to ask someone to marry you because you're not sure it will work out. Well, are you going to marry this person? I don't know. I need sufficient evidence that they're... No, you are never going to have sufficient evidence that that person is right for you. Never. if Clifford was right, no one would ever get in a relationship, because if you're waiting for evidence that this is the person for you, you're going to be waiting a long time. Because the evidence is ambivalent at best. Pretty shoddy. You just go with it, right? How many of you have ever had this? You're just like, maybe you're dating, maybe you've been out with this person. You're just like, I don't know. Well, and then what do? How do you decide?
I think, like you said, like, well, I guess sort of bite the bullet, like you just decide. But you have to have in your mind that you're going to grow together, and there's a whole bunch of things that come with that, because I don't know, rarely is it that love at first sight or that
Yeah, right.
perfect meeting.
I mean, there's lust at first sight for sure, but not, I mean, when you talk about real love, and, that's something that has to be cultivated. But how do you know that you can do that with the person that you're on the date with?
You don't, and that's why you date. Because a lot of people date and then they find out after a while that's not the right match, and then
Yeah.
but they understand better what the right match would look like or would be like maybe the next time.
I think it just comes down to, you just got to go with your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you can decide with your head. There are no facts, there are no quantifiable data here that's going to work out for you. And if you're waiting for quantifiable data, sufficient evidence, it's never going to happen. And so you're going to be alone for the rest of your life. Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life? If the answer is no, you have to take a chance. You have to get off the fence. You have to make a leap of faith. Religion works the same way for James. Not believing in God is like not being in a relationship. It might cut you off from the benefits of living a religious life, which is good for you, which is something you might enjoy. Maybe you won't. Maybe it's not for you, but you don't know until you try it. You can't know until you try it. You can't know if the relationship is going to work out until you try it. So you have to decide on non-intellectual grounds. And this is the way that James explains it. He says, our passional nature not only may, but must decide an option between propositions whenever there is genuine option that cannot be decided on intellectual grounds. What do? We have to go with our heart. We have to believe that it will work out. And so there isn't evidence, but we have to take a chance, or we may deprive ourselves of the benefits that religion will give us. And that's a terrible thing, because for some people, not for everyone, but for some people, the religious life is a very meaningful and purposeful life. And why would you want to deprive yourself of that opportunity? Maybe it doesn't work out for you, okay, but you have to try. You have to take a leap of faith. You shouldn't preclude the possibility beforehand simply because there's not enough evidence. That's what James says. Okay? Now, is this just magical thinking? Can faith really alter reality? Some of James' critics will say this. They'll say, like, look, you can't make something true just because you believe that it's true. James says, well, that kind of objection is rooted in the quest for certainty, and James is not a fan of certainty. Most of our beliefs that we hold about our life and ourself are based on evidence that is less than certain. But ultimately, there's no concrete test of what is true. James believes this. Brandon says, but what really is our heart? Excellent question, Brandon. It is just an intuitive process based on unconscious reception, or is it something else? I think that it's some type of algorithmic process that, well, we'll get there when we get there. But let's go with James for now, Brandon, and we can deconstruct this later when we talk about consciousness and the self, and we will. But let's go with James for now. James says, look, you're trying to get to certainty with evidence. That's not going to happen. All of the important beliefs that we have about ourselves, they're not based on certainty. They're not based even on sufficient evidence. So abandon the quest for certainty, because that's not how you get the truth. Now, here you have to understand that James is a pragmatist, and I'll talk about that, what that means in a moment. But James says, look, people hold contrasting views that they think are certain and they're 100% sure about. How is that possible? We should be suspicious of anyone who claims to know the truth with absolute certainty. We just should. That's not the way that truth works. Well, how does truth work? Here, James articulates a very valuable insight about truth. And we refer to this as the pragmatic theory of truth. A statement is true if it allows you to interact effectively and efficiently with your environment. Truth is not an agreement with reality. It is what works. It is what works. Ideas are true because they work. They allow you to do what you're trying to do. For the pragmatist, true ideas allow us to solve a problem. False ideas do not. And this is essentially the criteria that we do use in science. A theory is good if it does what it's supposed to do. And James simply takes that insight and applies it to the rest of our life. An idea is true if it works for us. So in a way, and I want to reinforce this idea, does James care if God is real or not? Does James care? No. If there really is an entity out there that is God, no, that makes no difference at all. What matters is that we believe that God is real and God manifests in our life in a positive way, and our life is better because we believe in God, and it probably will be. There's a lot of statistical analysis and a lot of studies that say people who have religion tend to be happier and more satisfied with their life. That has nothing to do with the reality of God, because these people believe in different gods. They can't all be real. But religion makes a positive impact on people's life. People live better lives because they have something to believe in. And that's really all that matters. Now, if you're a religious person, maybe that idea makes you uncomfortable. That James would recommend religion because it can improve your life, not because God is real. But God may be real. James doesn't know. There's no way to know. There's not sufficient evidence for it. But you have to just go with it, and you have to believe. So don't discount faith. Faith can be important. Najai, I think you don't know what to make of that, right? You're like, on the one hand, but on the other hand,
I think the more evidence comes from each one of us, and
Yeah.
James might see it a little more. If I think you just have to get more into it as opposed to just kind of. I feel like they make sort of broad statements. I get where you're coming from. All of the, like, if you say Bigfoot, I might be like, no, there's not a Bigfoot. Where's your evidence? And then you show me some doctored pictures that I'm like, how do you know those are real? All the questions, everything. But
Yeah.
but I think it's the experience of experiencing it. And I don't know. I feel like if somebody really had seen a Bigfoot, sometimes when they tell you, like, you can, again, we can question how can you really know, but I feel like sometimes you really know when somebody's really telling the truth.
Well, that's why cryptozoology is based on personal testimony and not any kind of standard, scientific evidence.
Hmm.
Because the idea is, why would you lie? I mean, you hear people genuinely believe. Well, the problem, though, is that people genuinely believe conflicting ideas.
Well, that, and sometimes like you said, our brain plays tricks on us, and we could have thought, like the guy thought he saw his dad, everything lined up
Yeah.
that it really should have been. But even some of the time, like the clowns, it was somebody running through the forest in a big furry thing, like
Yeah.
pretending to be a Bigfoot. So like there's all these different
Yeah.
things that play into it.
Man, you know what? If these things were easy, we wouldn't need a whole class to talk about them. All right. So James argues against Clifford. Clifford is wrong. The search for truth does not require us to completely avoid the possibility of being wrong. Once we accept that searching for the truth, we can risk error. We can risk being wrong. We will be wrong sometimes. That shouldn't matter to us. And James says, look, if you want to avoid all error, you could do that by not believing in anything. But then we wouldn't have any beliefs. And what good would that do? And James uses this analogy. If you wanted to avoid all error, you could just stop believing anything at all. But that's like a general keeping his soldiers out of battle because he's afraid that one of his soldiers will get wounded. No, you have to get out there. You have to join the fight. Yes, sometimes you'll take an injury. Sometimes you'll be wrong. But the only way you can win is if you risk something. And so the risk of being wrong outweighs the cost, right? Now, James gives some interesting examples of how this actually works, how his theory actually works. He says, look, think about how we socialize with each other. There are many times where we cannot wait for there to be enough evidence, and socialization is a really good example of this. How many of you have ever walked across a street where there's traffic? Everybody. Why would you do that? That's reckless. Do you have sufficient evidence to know that the drivers will stop for you? No. But you believe that they will. Right? That's how society works. Cooperation is essential to people in a society, but if everybody waited for proof that other people were going to reciprocate, nothing would ever get done. And so we believe without sufficient evidence. We believe that other people are good. We believe that they will cooperate with us. We believe that they will keep their promises. They don't always do these things, but they do these things enough that there is great benefit in cooperation, right? And so here, James gives the example of train robbers, which is a weird example to give, but he lived in a time where there were train robberies. Okay, think about that. And he asked this question, how can just a couple people rob a whole train filled with passengers? That's an interesting question. And you may say, well, they have guns or whatever, but I mean, think of planes get hijacked by one person with a knife. And so you think, like, how is that possible? Or a couple people, with knives, right? And James says, how can just a couple people take over a whole train? And James has an answer. He says, because the robbers can count on one another. They have each other's backs. Why don't the passengers rise up and disarm the robbers? They could very easily.
Because they don't know if anybody's going to go with them, so everybody's scared to move first.
Exactly. That's what James says. If I stand up, I don't know if everybody else is going to stand up at the same time, and I'll be the only one standing, and I'll be the one who gets shot. But if I believed in my fellow passengers, think of what we could accomplish. Now, I never have sufficient evidence that they're going to get up, but what if I believed in them? Think about what would be possible, right? If we believe that everyone would rise at once with us, we should each rise, and then train robbing would never be attempted. Brandon says, or they expect someone else will. I love this example because the train robbers, they have faith in each other, and the passengers don't. That's the role that faith can play in our life. Faith can make the impossible possible if we just believe. This is what James says. Okay, now this isn't like really a defense of theism, because again, James doesn't explicitly say that God has to be real to improve your life. Belief in God will probably improve your life, but it's not necessary for God to be real. How would we know? Because there's just no way to know. So what we're going to transition to, though, is this idea. Well, wait a minute. What about this idea about God? Is there a way philosophically that we can justify belief in God? And so we will be looking at the tradition of natural theology, the attempt to use reason and evidence to justify God's existence, or to demonstrate God's existence, or at least the possibility or probability that God exists.